I began my working life as an apprentice in a TV shop. Then I went back to school. Since then I've been a value analysis engineer for a major European electrical company, an aircraft instrument landing systems technician, a CB radio shop owner, a firefighter, a police officer, and a teacher. I'm Tom. Welcome to the channel. At 80 years old, I've had plenty of time to do clever things, wise things, and unbelievably stupid things. I've collected a lot of stories over the years, and I want to tell you about one of my early funny stories, which most definitely falls into the stupid category. But I like to think of it as a lesson learned the hard way. Let me take you back to almost the start, with the day 16-year-old me discovered that paint tins and rifles should never ever share the same room. Have you ever done something so stupid that halfway through a little voice in your head says, "Oh yes, this will be a disaster," but you do it anyway? Well, at 16 I had those moments several times a day, but this one was special. I was working in the service department of a small TV shop. There were only two of us. My colleague, who actually knew what he was doing, and me, who absolutely didn't. Now this was way back when gun ownership in the UK was more relaxed, and the chap I worked with owned a Remington 22 rifle. Our workshop was in a very old building, which had been a small house, one up and one down. It was in a bad state and would be condemned these days. On this particular day, he brought his rifle into the workshop because we'd had a rat problem. Of course, when your workshop has rats, the obvious solution is to introduce live ammunition. The rats must have known, because that day we saw none. Anyway, a little later he went out on a couple of home service calls, leaving me alone in the workshop with A, a rifle, B, an empty building, and C, the brain of a 16-year-old. What a combination. Curiosity grabbed me by the collar. I'd watched him load it. I was sure I knew how guns work. I'd seen it on TV. So yes, I was going to fire it. But as we were in a built-up area, where could I do it without attracting attention? Then came the kind of idea only a young mind can produce. Upstairs was what had originally been a bedroom. We didn't use it much because it was the storage room for stuff that we didn't really need but was too good to throw away. Nothing important up there, just scrap TVs and paint tins. Paint tins? Wow, paint tins! What could possibly go wrong? I marched upstairs with the rifle and the confidence of youth. I did at least think about safety. I lined up a scrap TV in front of the old fireplace, deciding that shooting a TV screen would be interesting but bad. But shooting paint tins? Well, that was practically science. I placed one paint tin on top of the TV and set an empty one below and in front of it. My genius plan. Shoot a neat hole in the top tin so that the paint would pour out beautifully into the one before. A sort of DIY fountain feature. I loaded one round, took aim, and bang! Instant regret. I had catastrophically underestimated the power of a 2.2 long rifle bullet. The lid of the paint tin blasted straight into the ceiling, followed by a magnificent geyser of white paint. For a glorious second I stood frozen, watching the ceiling growing stalactites of dripping white goo. Then the paint rained down onto the old TVs, transforming them into modern art. Panic kicked in. My colleague could be back any minute. I briefly considered burning the building down to hide the evidence. That seemed a little over the top, even at 16, even with my brain. So instead, I sprinted around the room like a rat on caffeine, scrubbing paint off the TVs, the floor, the ceiling, and probably myself. I raced downstairs, shoving the rifle back exactly where it had been, and tried to look casual. By the time he returned, the workshop was spotless. I was spotless. The ceiling less so, but amazingly, no one ever noticed the ceiling, so no one found out, until now. The funny thing about getting older is this. You may not remember why you sat down at the computer 20 minutes ago, but you can remember minute details from 60 or 70 years ago, as if they happened yesterday. I used to worry about growing old, but someone once said something that has stayed with me. Don't complain about growing old. It's a privilege denied to many. And it's true. At 80, most of my parents' generation have already passed. I have one uncle left in his late 90s. I often think about things that happened long ago, and I realise I have no one left to ask the missing details. I was born in the post-war baby boom, but I wasn't the son of a returning soldier. My father was a coal miner, an essential worker during the war. 3 months before I was born, he tragically died from TB meningitis. So I never knew him, but as a child I only had one photograph, and I used to sit in the garden with it, talking to him as if he were there. My mother's whole family lived in the same house, 7 of them, and I called them all by their first names. To them my grandmother was Mother, and so that's what I called her too. My real mother was Mama. Perfectly simple system. People sometimes assume that because I'm old I must be wise. I wish that were true. All I could do is pass on little stories like today's and hope someone learns a lesson that I didn't. It's nice to have a couple of takeaways from your video, and I would suggest this. One is think twice and don't fire rifles indoors. And the second one is take the time to learn as much as you can from your family whilst you have them. Well, if you want more stories like this from someone who should probably know better by now, but I feel doesn't, you know what to do. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.